Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and with me, as always, is my co-star, Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
I threw her off because I usually introduce her with some, creative adjective, but, I think co-star makes sense. So we have a very special episode. Today is our day to do interviews, and we always get very excited when we bring special people into the podcast. So Jennifer, would you like to introduce our guest today?
Sure. Today we're talking about one of the hottest and most competitive commercial real estate sectors in South Florida, and that's the industrial market in Doral. And with us today is Jerry Stapel of Avanti Way Commercial, and he brings a unique mix of background in technology, finance, and real estate to the table. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I want you to know that when you started the introduction, you said the hottest, most competitive. He got so excited. I saw it. I saw
the
it in his
hottest,
face.
most competitive guy in our office. There you go. I'll change my intro.
I love it.
My eyes lit for a brief 2 seconds.
So go ahead, Jerry. Give us a little bit of background, how you got into real estate and just a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Sure. Well, and I'm Colombian by birth, and my dad was Dutch. And so that throws a lot of people off because my name is not Hispanic, but I was born and raised in Colombia. And I studied computer engineering. And as soon as I got my degree, I realized this is not what I want to do in my life because I don't want to be talking to a computer or not. I need interaction. So in 1992, I was offered a position here in Miami in the technology sector in the commercial arena. So I was in sales. And I did that up until 2001 when the famous .com imploded. All those incubators basically were busted. I remember that I was looking for a job, and I always liked the financial planning aspect. I like the stock market, financial planning. And so I got my Series 7, I got all my securities license, and I started doing financial planning. And I was doing quite well. I mean, I was growing in my career when in 2008, 2009, the country went belly up. 200 banks went bankrupt, and the entire stock market took a hit. All of my clients that I called for investments were investing in real estate because if they had cash, it was the time to buy. It's interesting that there are something called contrarian indicators. And when the masses are going one way, the contrarians are going the other way, and they're usually right. So they don't think like the masses. And I was missing the boat. I would call a friend, Fernando, hey, would you like to invest in bonds or whatever? He goes, no, I'm buying an apartment in Hialeah. Or I'm buying a duplex, or I'm buying something with bricks that I can get passive income from. And people were distrusting the information, the economic information, and they were distrusting that the information was coming from Wall Street. Everybody was going back to basics, and real estate has been for centuries the way to that most people approach passive income. So I said, I need to go get my license. And I got my license, and I started meddling into real estate. This was in 2011. I realized quickly that residential was not really something I felt comfortable. But I felt really comfortable in commercial. I guess because, I don't know, and the level of professionalism that you see in the commercial real estate is different than what you see in residential. I don't want to go into it, but I guess the commercial real estate arena sets the bar significantly higher. And the players in the industry expect you to step up to their level. And I like that. I felt that it was something that I resonated with. And I remember in the transition between 2009 and 2011, I was doing business planning and business consulting. So that was something that I started working with to try to supplement my income, because in 2008 and 9, when the market went down and crashed, so did my income. So with business planning and business consulting came business brokerage. So when I joined Avanti Way in 2011, I immediately told Enrique and Andres, hey, I'm familiar with this association that is very large in Florida for business brokerage. I would like to get Avanti Way certified on that. And they allowed me to take the lead on that. And I took the lead and I started doing business transactions. And through business transactions, I started getting acquainted with commercial real estate, commercial leases, because every business had a lease that needed to be assigned or needed to be negotiated. And that's how I started getting into commercial real estate.
So for those who aren't familiar with the area, I mean, if you're from Miami, you're familiar with Doral, but for those who aren't, what makes Doral such a strategic location for industrial properties, and what made you focus on Doral and industrial?
So Doral is, I used to think that Coral Gables was the most centric city in Miami because it's close to everything. And next to Coral Gables is Doral. Doral is right next to the airport, literally, 3, 4, 5 miles. And it's not even 10 or 12 miles from the Miami port or the port of Miami. So it started 30 years ago that Doral started blooming as a industrial hub. And you would see warehouses popping everywhere because of its proximity to the airport and because of its proximity to the port of Miami. And we have 3 major highways that basically surround Doral. You have A36, A26, and the Turnpike. And Doral is right in the smack middle of it, which makes it a very strategic location if you need to do distribution, which a lot of people in Florida do. If you're importing goods from Latin America or anywhere in the world, it's strategic.
And how are you seeing the current state of the market in Doral right now? Growth, stability, picking up, slowing?
So I think that Doral as a city, I think it's finishing its teenage years, to call it somehow. I would say that about 25 years ago it was its infancy, and you can see that it was mostly industrial. 25 years ago, I think I was telling you that I missed the boat on some new developments in residential because I didn't see it happening. I missed that boat because 90% of Doral was industrial.
Right.
And there was nothing else. And I said, who wants to live next to so many warehouses? Well, Doral became a city, and I would say that now we have a more developed city where you see parks and schools, and you see hospitals, and it's matured. I would say it's now a fully developed city, and it grew so fast that I think that now we are in a stable situation. I don't think that Doral can grow a lot more because we don't have more to grow. I mean, I think the city has expanded, in every which way that you can. It's very booming for business. You see, I would say that a vast majority of citizens or residents in Doral are entrepreneurs. So you see a very thriving entrepreneurial spirit everywhere you go. A lot of people are just talking about business, whether it's importing, exporting, or if you're a retailer, a restaurateur. Doral, you always hear people buzzing about business. And I think that's what makes it a very unique place.
And some of the biggest players in industrial are in Doral, right? There's Link and Prologis. All the big guys are there. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing there. And I know some like the MICC that you really focus a lot on, even though it's industrial, a lot of it has like a retail component to it. And I know you're not into retail, you're more industrial, but give us a little bit of an overview of those projects.
So it was interesting to see that institutional companies had invested so large in Doral. I once asked the peers in a conference, an economic conference, about what percentage of the industrial market they thought was owned by these institutionals. And they said, I think 30% or so. I think it's larger. I mean, I think that everywhere you go, these guys are just gobbling land and building. So it was very interesting to see that these companies had invested so heavily in Miami. I'm very familiar with Link and Prologis and Sieges and Terreno and all these companies. And it's also very, I guess, interesting to deal with them. Like, they deal differently. Hispanics are a little bit more relaxed, if you understand my terms. These guys are very straightforward, business oriented, but they're very by the book. And that's something that is not very typical of Miami. So it's a very interesting mix. And I always enjoyed doing business with them because you always learn something by dealing with these companies. I think best practices that you could also take elsewhere, or you can have other clients of yours learn from. These guys they don't take shortcuts. They always do everything by the book, which is something that in Miami is rare.
For sure. And to your point, the thing that's amazing about Doral is that as a city, it doubles in size from 9 to 5, just because you're surrounded by so many centers of employment. There's so much business that is happening in Doral. I know that as an industrial, broker, you do a lot of leasing. And over the years, what are you seeing has changed in terms of the features, the amenities, the location, the needs that the tenants are looking for in the spaces that they're occupying?
So I see that the city has invested a lot in public recreation. I think that it's welcoming more and more thriving restaurants. You can find almost any cuisine in Doral, from Turkish to Lebanese, Peruvian, steakhouses. It's very interesting. And like you said, a lot of people come to Doral to work and then they go back to, where they live. Matter of fact, I guess the three of us go to Doral to work. None of us live in Doral. So it's very interesting. And of course, you see sometimes the effect in traffic. And I think that the city is trying to do more in that. But I also, for instance, see they have the trolley. They have like a free taxi service for electric vehicles of some sort. And it's interesting to see they redevelop this. I don't know if they call it the Doral Central Park or the Bermudez Park. It's changed names. But the city has invested very important funds into that to make the city less industrial and more residential. I guess more appealing to people to come live in Doral and avoid the traffic of having to live in Homestead or Kendall and have to commute to Doral. And so I like that about Doral. I think that the government is very business oriented, but it's also they try to make it a very welcoming city. And I think it's been voted one of the best cities to live in the United States in the last 5 or 10 years. And it's for a reason. They have not de-industrialized, but they have promoted a lot more residential, which is good and bad, because I guess too many condos, in my opinion, it just affects traffic significantly. But other than that, we still have the Doral Trump golf courses. I mean, they have Costa del Sol golf courses. It's interesting that in a small city, you have 3 complete golf courses plus Costa del Sol. You have 4, and it's not a big city. You have the Central Park, and then they have certain other areas for public recreation.
Well, it also speaks to a trend that's been happening in Dade County as a whole, which really started back if you really look at the creation of downtown Doral, and it's this idea of creating self-sustaining cities or self-sustaining neighborhoods within Miami-Dade County. I mean, you speak about 25 years ago how industrial Doral has been historically, and that you missed the boat on looking at the residential component. But even if you fast forward over the last 3-4 years, the new residential developments in Wynwood, most people, would not have bet that would be in the future of Wynwood as a city when it was so industrial, and it really evolved from industrial to retail to now you see this full sense component. But it is a sense, and there was a time in my life where I lived in Doral, and there was a sense of once downtown Doral was built, I no longer had to drive. To your point, you could get a lot of great cuisine in Doral. You have a lot of great restaurateurs, a lot of great chefs, and a lot of great experiences. And they do invest significantly in green space. And so now you don't have to drive all the way to Miami Beach or go elsewhere to be able to get a good experience, at night. And you can feel the difference of what the city feels like from Monday to Friday as opposed to the weekends. It's a really interesting component. Having said that, and you mentioned, traffic patterns and all stuff, but specifically to industrial, have you seen a shift in what the industrial tenant is looking for in industrial space?
So I think that there is also a reality in our market before the pandemic and after the pandemic. everything or many things shifted after the pandemic. If Amazon was big after the pandemic, it just turned huge. And now I was reading this morning a report about how Amazon is investing so heavily into grocery delivering. They are trying to compete with Walmart, which is dominant in that space. I think that we have seen a huge increase in distribution and a little bit of a decrease on the manufacturing. Manufacturing has shifted more towards the Hialeah, Opaloka areas, and Doral. You can tell that they are welcoming more distribution sort of businesses, and that's one of the shifts that I've seen. You still see some manufacturing. As a matter of fact, I recently just placed a company that was in MICC. They manufacture blinds of some different sorts. Modern blinds and automated blinds and stuff like that. We helped them move about 2 years ago to Medley, and he immediately outgrew that location. And now he is on 72nd and 30th Street. That's Airport Trade Center. It used to be owned by Link. They recently sold it. And he has a 7,000 square feet air conditioning manufacturing facility with huge machines to do their jobs. So you still see manufacturing, but I guess Doral has also become more conscious about the environment, I think. So they are very restrictive on the uses that you see on the warehouses. Automotive has been pushed away. Anything that has to do with automotive. Manufacturing, I guess you could see some light manufacturing, but you don't see medium or heavy. And I guess it's also because now the city is so populated. I mean, so many people living, and they don't want, I guess, pollution. It makes sense. So I've seen that shift. I've seen a huge increase in distribution because of its proximity to the airport. I still see a lot of activity near the airport for cooler warehouses for flowers and produce and stuff of that nature that come from the airport. And they need, in Spanish, se llama cadena de frío, and they need to maintain the
cooler,
the freshness of their product.
The supply chain has to be cool all along the way. They can't.
Right. In the scorching hot of Miami, it's very difficult. So being so close to the airport, it's strategic for these guys. You will continue to see fruits, vegetables, produce, and flowers thriving. I mean, the warehouses are right there, within 2 miles or 3 miles of the airport. A guy who does that, and you tell him Opaloka, says way too far. Hialeah, way too far. Medley is way too far. So that strategic location gives Doral a continuous demand for that type of use.
And these businesses, are they, you sound like you said that some of them are expanding. Are most of them local businesses, or are they being driven more by national or international?
I see a lot of local investment. That's my experience, is people that live in Miami and work in Miami. So I see a lot of activity here.
So from an investor's perspective, how do industrial properties in Doral compare to other parts? I know you said there's more manufacturing, like in Medley. In terms of pricing and demand and vacancy, how does it compare? Because I know you do all of Miami-Dade.
So in real estate, we have this slogan, it's for centuries, is location, location, location. And Doral is centric and strategic, and because of that, it commands a higher rent. So when you look at, but what I have seen also is because of such demand on warehouses, prices have been increasing everywhere else. In other words, you go to Flagler Station, which is Medley, and it's expensive. You go to Hialeah Gardens, there's a bunch of new developments in industrial. They're not necessarily cheaper. And what they're offering is maybe taller buildings that they allow you more storage by volume. And that's very attractive to people. So Doral, it's very unique. But in terms of demand, you always see demand in Doral because of strategic location. Prices always, I guess they tend to hold more. You can negotiate a little bit more in Hialeah or Opaloka or Medley. Landlords in Doral tend to hold more to what they're asking. They're asking rates. And you tend to see clients that once they lease in Doral, and if their warehouses, they like to stay in that area. It's very expensive for them to move. If they do any manufacturing, to get all the permittings and get all the facilities again licensed, then very complicated. So that allows, and the location, I guess buildings are not as new because Doral was developed already 25 years ago industrially. So I guess the biggest drawback or shortfall that you see in industrial in Doral is the height of their industrial locations. And that's what other locations are offering to lure tenants to move to their places. Is if you do distribution, and Miami has become a distribution hub, volume is huge. And they are moving to these taller buildings because they know they can store, more product there. But if you still need like the flowers or the produce or stuff like that, proximity to the airport, or if for you the time to customer, air cargo is huge in Miami. And if for you it's very important, for instance, I remember we've placed a few aircraft part distributors. I don't know if you're familiar with the term AOG, aircraft on ground. Miami is American Airlines has a hub in Miami, and there's many airplanes that come in and out. And if any part of these aircraft is defective, they need to change it. They need it fast. That makes Doral also strategic. So I see a thriving city that will continue. I mean, unless we move the airport to somewhere else, Doral will continue to have high demand.
We don't have anywhere else to move it.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things about Doral, and it's interesting because it made me think of this when you were talking about the ceiling heights, is even though it's a small city, even the industrial is pretty segregated, right? So the newer, higher ceilings, much bigger centers are closer to the turnpike, so they're more northwest Doral versus like where our office is, and they have the lower ceilings closer to the airport. A lot easier ease of access for trucks and everything else being in that 826, 836, 95 section. Do you see a huge difference in pricing or demand between those two areas, other than obviously because of the size?
No, I mean, I think Miami in general is stabilizing in terms of rates, because Wynwood has its own appeal. All this new tech companies are moving to the Wynwood area, and it's a flourishing city. I think the entire city has experienced a big time gentrifying, and I see that perhaps the next remodeling, if you want to call it gentrification, will come probably in the area of Brownsville, Alapata. Maybe that area will start getting developed. You don't find land. It's very difficult to find land that you could develop for new industrial, but you do. I mean, I think that the next phase would be buying old warehouses that are no longer very. I mean, they need to be completely demolished, and new product will be developed. About 2-3 years ago, I met with a Chilean company. They were trying to buy about a couple of acres of industrial land to do a fully automated freezer. Imagine a warehouse that is 5 or 6 stories high, and imagine that everything is automated by pallets, where they would store your pallet in one part of that cube, and on the touch of a computer, you could get that pallet back to you. And I found that concept like so novel, and it was interesting to see that didn't exist in Miami. I mean, and this guy from Chile was trying to buy land to develop that, and the project got halted because the industrial land just continued to be prohibitively expensive. But I see that area, Alapata, not Overtown, but Alapata or Brownsville, just north of the other highway, which is 112, right north of that, before Hialeah. So it's kind of Hialeah, but it's not. And I think that is going to be the next boom of industrial.
And it's really interesting because, I mean, you mentioned American Airlines, who's our largest private employer in Dade County. So, it has an incredible influence, but just how dynamically different a lot of the businesses that are occupying these industrial spaces are. So there is a diversity. This is not just import export. I remember not too long ago visiting a company that what they do is they import and export horses, but not just any horses. They're competitive horses. So there's like an entire, competition between dressage and these competitive horse racing and all other stuff. And basically they travel all around the world to these competitions. Well, they got to come in and out. And the hub for coming into the country is Miami. right? And then now they have to get transported all around. So it's really interesting, just the diversity of the types of businesses that you find. And I remember that part of their choice of location, the most important decision they made when they looked at these warehouses was how close were they to the airport, right? I mean, that proximity was incredibly important. You obviously, you deal a lot in industrial. I know you do other things as well, but an investor has the choice to invest in retail, in multifamily, and industrial. Why? And I think you mentioned a little bit of a variety of the reasons why, but why is industrial a great place to put your money as an investor?
It's a great question. And I think that the first thought that comes to mind is stability of tenant. You're going to have a long-term tenant. I mean, I myself, I'm an owner of multifamily, and I have residential real estate. But typically a tenant lasts, a couple of years, 2 years, 3 years, and then they move on. But in industrial, you have a tenant that could be there with you for 10, 15, 20 years. So it's a lot less maintenance. I mean, it's just 4 walls, a small office, and a bathroom. It doesn't get any simpler than that. So a lot of investors fear the property maintenance, the property management. They fear that. And I think industrial is appealing because of that. It's a quite simple proposition. Make sure that the roof is in good condition, right? Pretty much it. If, everything else pretty much is on the tenant side, yes, but roof and structural, the walls are structurally sound. It also, I guess, withstand storms in a different way than residential. You have concrete walls, you have concrete roof for the most part, and that makes it a bunker. Miami, of course, is in the center of the storm every year from July through November. And we're all fearing, we're now dealing with Aaron. That is we might dodge Aaron, but this is our bread and butter every summer. Well, industrial has that resilience because it's all concrete. And, of course, we have all sorts of insurances, but it's also significantly less than residential. So I think the stability of the tenant, the leases are 3 to 5 or longer years, and you already stipulate increases. Sometimes it's difficult to increase a rent on a tenant. The tenant, I pay you on time, I take care of your property, don't raise my rent. Whereas in industrial or commercial, before you start giving the keys, you already know the rent's going to be next year and the year after. And even there are clauses that says if your operating expenses exceed, there's going to be an adjustment, and there's nothing you can do about that. So from the investor's perspective, it's very easy to project what your net earnings or operating income is going to be in the next year. It brings you stability of tenants. Tenants also have to show you their financial strength. You see a lot of new companies in Doral, and so the landlord demands higher deposits to protect their interest. But all of that, I guess, it creates a good equation for an investor to say, this is going to be significantly more stable and easier to manage than if I go into residential.
So other than checking the roof for an investor, what due diligence steps are the most critical in acquiring industrial real estate?
I think that you need to do what's called a phase 1 and a phase 2. The problem is the history of the warehouse. You want to know if that warehouse had some sort of environmental hazard uses previous to you buying it, because you're inheriting that. And you want to make sure that you don't have a headache, because Florida in general, we're sitting on an aquifer. Everything, here you dig 2 feet down and you already found water. So if the warehouse that you're purchasing was used for any environmental hazard use, oil change or any sort of hazard materials, you want to make sure that your warehouse is clean and that is structurally sound. Even though, yes, they're concrete. We have had our share of storms. You want to make sure that it's structurally sound, and the roof, and of course the air conditioning, because who can live in Miami without air conditioning?
Especially this summer.
Right. So you want to make sure that the plumbing, the electricity is key, especially if the use is going to require high power. You want to make sure it has it, or it's easier to bring. Can you connect to the FBO? How costly it's going to be? So there's a few I mean, yes, if you look at distribution, it's very simple. You put a few racks and you're good to go. But if you're going to do light manufacturing, then now you're talking about, for instance, this blind manufacturing, he needed AC in the warehouse, and warehouses don't have insulation. So you need to take that into consideration. And electricity is another unit, more than plumbing. I have a client of ours that does oil repackaging. He brings large containers of olive oil or avocado oil, and then he packages them in small containers to be sold. And he also manufactures soap. Those kind of uses, you need to make sure that you have the plumbing correctly, electricity. So the due diligence usually in industrial lasts 30 days for that particular reason. You want to make sure that all these issues are evaluated correctly.
Yeah, and you want to affirm or confirm the zoning, for the use that you want to attend, because, some people just think, well, it looks like a warehouse. It's being used as a warehouse, so, I can do anything in it. But in reality, there are big variations.
I just met with a peer of mine 2 days ago, and he was telling me he was actually leasing an MICC. And MICC, I would say 95% is light industrial. Well, you'd be surprised. He had just leased a space. The use was wholesale. And if you want to do light industrial, you need to do a change of use. And it is an uphill battle to change that use. And so you see a warehouse, you assume that it is going to be okay for light industrial, and it's not. And impact fees can be very costly. Permitting, you need to get electrical plans, plumbing plans. It could be an uphill battle. So the first thing, I guess, and that's the reason why you and Aaron and I have a job, is because we can advise our clients, listen, it's not so simple. It's not that you have a warehouse, you can immediately put an auto mechanical shop. No, it's not so simple. Zoning is key. And you just brought up a very important.
So we talked about investors. What about businesses that are looking to lease or expand in Doral? What's the first thing that they should do in order to be competitive and have their lease considered?
Well, I think that because I had also some experience in business brokerage, I think that the two largest expenses that any business has, one is the rent, the second one is payroll. But we're talking about the rent. So negotiating a good lease is key for the future of this business. They need to make sure that they are competitive in their leases and negotiating the good terms. I'm seeing, at least this company that I told you that does oil repackaging, his lease expires in June of next year. We were talking just 2 days ago, because these conversations need to happen several months before. And now he's considering purchasing, which is interesting. Once the business has matured and they see that their business model is working, now I say, well, how do I buy my own warehouse? And I get out of this, renting forever. And we saw a huge increase. I mean, you brought us an important subject, and that is, before the pandemic, and Fernando could attest to that, the rate in Doral was going between $10 and $12 a foot. Today, we're going at 24. This is 4 years ago. Rents doubled. That can cripple any business. And this uncertainty, you have a lease for 3 or 5 years. That means that in 3 to 5 years, you have to renegotiate, sit down with the landlord, and look at the market. What happened in Miami was so, unique that a lot of people went out of business because they just could not pay the rent. And the market was paying those rents. So negotiating a good lease, negotiating the terms of the good, options to renew, all these are critical points on any business trying to project themselves into the future.
And are there any policy or infrastructure changes that you would like to see? We've talked about this on the retail side, things that we'd like to see either counties or cities do that would help strengthen the area for retail. Do you see any policy or infrastructure changes that could help strengthen Doral's position as an industrial hub?
I think that we need to work on, and I don't know how to tackle that, because it would be traffic, is how to perhaps alleviate traffic. They did some, if you're heading eastbound on 25th, there's a ramp that takes you right to the airport to alleviate some of that trucking. Again, Doral has a huge amount of trucks I think that we need to come up with or figure out how to alleviate traffic. Don't have the answer, but I think that that's a key point.
Well, I'll tell you something, Jerry, that may even surprise you. So Doral doesn't control all of the traffic lights in Doral. And so when you speak to the people in Doral, in the city of Doral, part of what they consider to be perhaps the way forward is that you have Dade County that controls some of the traffic lights and some of the traffic patterns, and then you have the city of Doral that does the same thing, and then you have the Florida Department of Transportation with the roads, with the highways and all that stuff. So part of it is that things don't move necessarily in concert. So they feel like, there are certain times of the day where if we had control of these lights, they would move a lot faster, right, than the timer that they're on. Or then if we had this other control, then we would be able to kind of, move everything in a concert. So it's really interesting when you dig down how sometimes it's the little things that you would assume, well, they control all of this. Why are they making it better? But it's just the fact that you have, all these different municipalities.
I think that, like you just said, smart traffic lights. I mean, we are into the future. The future is here. Artificial intelligence is here, whether you like it or not. So I think that we need to come up. These systems need to help us deviate traffic. It's interesting because you go on I-75 or 595, and some of these highways work in one way in a certain time and a different way. I think we need to come up with creative ideas to alleviate traffic in Miami because it's difficult. So to Jennifer's question, I think traffic would be something that I would love to see. I would like to see, less bureaucracy in terms of permitting and licensing. I mean, anybody tells you is going to get a license, you're like, oh, God help you. I always tell people it's significantly easier to buy an established business than to get a new one, because to get the licensing and permits, it's going to take you forever. And I think that the cities need to realize this. And some cities have done a better job at being more business oriented. And let's help our businesses come to our city and do business here. But apparently some are just dinosaurs that they like to just put hurdles in front of business owners. And honestly, it's very frustrating. So that's another issue, maybe for another podcast.
So I think I know the answer to this question because we've talked about it, but Port Miami or Miami International as the bigger driver for Doral's activity?
I would say that the airport, the warehouse, the sizes of the warehouses and the heights of the warehouses and the proximity to the airport. I think that the driver is slightly more, I wouldn't say significantly more, but I would say the driver would be the airport. Marine cargo, I don't know. I just see it going more to the Opa-locka, Hialeah, the larger warehouses, the
Miami Gardens,
the 100,000 square feet warehouses. And yes, there are a few of those in Doral, but you don't see them as often. It's more the smaller. I guess the typical size in Doral is like 5,000 square feet. That's a small warehouse if you think about it, and it's mostly because air cargo, in my humble opinion.
I would agree with you. I was just curious since I don't really specialize in that market, but just from what I see, the names on the...
people tell me, what do you think about warehouse? It's very interesting because every new customer is a new story, is a new movie, and I find it very interesting. You find that thriving in retail. I like it in industrial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know you said that it's pretty much just four walls, but then you throw in, unless there's a freezer or a cooler. So what, in your opinion, is the most underrated feature of a well-designed warehouse?
I think temperature control is huge. Regardless of the product that you move or the people that work in your warehouse, if you can have I wouldn't say a cooled or a warehouse with air conditioning, but if you can have some sort of a ventilation system that allows your people to work in a more comfortable manner is significant. I mean, August could be grueling for somebody in a warehouse that has no temperature control. Forget about an air conditioning, talk about just airflow. So I think that that's one feature that I like, but because of not so much supply, you're tied to what there is. In other words, beggars can be choosers. If you're looking for a 10,000 square feet warehouse, there's only so many in Doral. So if you're trying to cherry pick the one that has a better temperature control, well, you're going to be looking for a long time. The rest could be worked out because even the office to warehouse space ratio could be worked out. I mean, you can build a little bit more office, or you can, create a little bit more, reduce the office to create more warehouse space. One of the, frustrating aspects in the last 5 years have been a lot of retail use trying to migrate to industrial. A lot of recreational uses. They try to get into warehousing because it's significantly less expensive. And then we jump into the parking situation. So paddle or basketball courts or volleyball courts or any gym, they want to go into a warehouse because it costs less than half of what a retail location would do or would cost, but you don't have any parking because you don't need more parking. If you think about it, you only need a certain amount of parking. The parking ratio is significantly less. But if you ask me, I would say temperature control would be key for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to tell us?
Actually, I did want to ask Jerry, because you mentioned about all the different cuisines in Doral. Do you have a go-to place? What's your favorite restaurant in Doral?
He tells me he can get lunch for under $15, which you can't even get at McDonald's.
There's a place for $12, and they give you a little soup and dessert for $12. Okay? Sit down. I love Lebanese. Beirut is a great go-to. I love steak. So there's a new place called Manny's Wood Grill on 87, right next to our office. I'm Colombian, so I favor Colombian food. I love Peruvian. I mean, honestly, you get in Doral, there's sushi, there's miyako, but I love Divino Ceviche. I love, every week is like, what do I feel like eating? Because
I was shocked when I started working in Doral by how good the restaurant, it was, I thought, okay, I can get an arepa, I can get an empanada, I can get, no, the quality of the food, everything, exactly, and you can find it, and very good, yeah.
What do you want? What do you feel like eating? And I can take you. The only problem is that takes a dent on your wallet, because then it's like, but I think that that also creates an opportunity for some people. Like I have a friend of mine who owns a commercial kitchen, and they do meal deliveries, and they do very well-designed menus, and they bring it to you. As a matter of fact, I brought them to the office the other day, and a few people sign up to their program. We have it here because my mother-in-law lives with us, and they provide. Every day they come with today's meal. For convenience, for cost, it's great for people. And like we discussed at the beginning of the program, a lot of people flock to Doral for work. Well, if you're going out to restaurants, it could be expensive. If you can control that expense by having the meal delivered to you at work, it saves you time, which is...
Time is money. We get it.
No, time is money, but at the same time, we like to go to lunch. Like it's a little break. If you're having lunch in the office, you really did not take a break. But anyway, that's another subject. But you can eat anything in Doral. There's all kinds of, but my go-to, I would say Colombian, and there's like 3 or 4 places that I go to. But Peruvian, I love Peruvian more. I guess my loyalty is to Colombian, but if you ask me, Peruvian food is the most delicious food in the world.
Name drop at least one of your 3 Colombians.
Well, I like mondongos, I like Montserrat, I like La Caleña, I like
There you
Macondo.
go, yeah.
There's 4.
I'm a Macondo fan for sure, too. They have great arepas. Great coffee, great arepas, and great chocolate.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're going to have to stop this because you guys are making me hungry.
For some reason, Fernando and I always end up talking about food. And we're always hungry by the end.
That's crazy.
Well, I suggest that the next meeting that we have in person should be at a good restaurant in Doral. So.
You got it. You got it, buddy.
100%.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to leave us with that you didn't get to say that you were hoping to say? Or?
No, I appreciate you guys having me. It's been a pleasure working with you guys and learning from you guys.
Likewise, my friend.
I mean, I've been with Avanti for 14 years, so I appreciate the support and the cheering on the sidelines. Go
Of course. So you got it. I love it.
No vacation, Jerry.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this very special episode. Thank you, Jerry, so much for being with us here today. So without further ado, we'll say goodbye. Goodbye, Jennifer.
Goodbye. Goodbye, Jerry.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.